we have emerged from executive session and the regular board meeting is now back in order. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda? I'd like to propose a motion to revise the agenda to add an item under review and discuss Wilton school bonding projects. Is there a motion? Thank you, Lori. Is there a second? Thank you, Patrick. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. We'll make that 3E.
Great.
Comments from the public. The board has set aside time at the beginning and end of regular meetings for public comments for members of the public to share their views on matters involving the Wilton Public Schools and to help inform the board's decisions on such matters. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to any one subject. For the record, please also give your name and address. The board considers the views of citizens in its deliberations and welcomes and appreciates public comment. The board listens to public comment thoughtfully and with interest. The board, however, generally does not respond to public comment during board meetings by offering commentary or answering questions. The board also invites commentators and the public to contact the board or the superintendent directly with any specific questions or comments. The board, through the chair and the superintendent, may respond to questions and comments offered during public comment or shared directly. And in responding, may also direct members of the public to the appropriate staff per response. Are there any comments from the public? None in the room and none online. Consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of minutes from the special meeting of February 27th and also personnel changes. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Nicola. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Board reports and recognition. Just real quickly on my end, I would just like to thank Dr. Smith and this board for all their hard work. This week on April 1st, the Board of Finance unanimously approved our budget as proposed to them at a 4% increase. So I just would like to again extend my congratulations to everybody around this table and look forward to seeing lots of faces at the annual town meeting on Tuesday, May 6th, I believe, where the resolutions, including our budget, will go to the town for a vote.
Great. Well, thank you. Nice to see everybody. Today is the first day of the fourth quarter, so buckle up because it's going to be over before you know it. A couple of updates. On Tuesday, April 1st, Junior Achievement of Greater Fairfield County hosted their annual stock market competition at Fairfield University. So there were schools from around Fairfield County that attended, including Ridgefield, Norwalk, Shelton, Stratford, and Danbury. Wilton High School students, Kieran Lenahan, Ryan Doman, Henry Snow, and Ward placed first with a total portfolio of over $1.5 million and an ROI of 100%. So congratulations. If anyone needs a money manager, there's a few sitting in Wilton High School that I'm sure would be good.
Sitting like this about the stock market.
So they've earned a place to go to nationals, which will take place in Atlanta from June 8th to the 12th. We had some of our high school students, Gabrielle Sharon, Nixoma, and Daisy Beach, were selected to perform in the honor choir at the 2025 ACBA National Conference held in Dallas back on March 22nd. More than 5,000 students in middle and high schools throughout the U.S. auditioned. This prestigious ACBA National Honor Choir will perform at the Wilton H. Myerson Symphony Center, considered one of the world's best concert halls and well known for its exceptional acoustics. This is a premier gathering of choral professionals, from legends in the field to emerging professionals. The conference attracts vocalists, educators, conductors, composers, and poets. So congratulations to those three for exceptional opportunity. And last but not last, Dr. Falcone and her staff last night held their third annual World Culture Night, and can I just say bravo, that was amazing. This is like a true community event, so parents and families, kind of representing, cultures from all across the globe, came and shared some information about the cultures and all kinds of different food and pastries, and it was a wonderful, wonderful gathering. A number of our students got to perform, so I really hats off to you and to your staff for putting that together. I look forward to the full day.
It gets better every year.
Great, that's all I have.
Financial report.
Yeah, Liza's not here, she's taking her class, so you have the financial report that I don't know if we talked about this here or not, but the state legislature had proposed adding $40 million to this year's excess cost. We got signed off on that. So that's really good news for us. That, if it all comes through, that should be an additional plus or minus $200,000 that will come to the local public schools to help us offset the excess cost. So, because of the reductions and the shortfall last year, the reimbursement rate for us was just below 60%. And with this money coming through, that should push us just about 70%. So definitely a move in the right direction. So we're really happy about that. We had talked about purchasing the van. It's out here sitting in the parking lot, and we're just finalizing the driver. Lila had to chase down and just make sure that we have the right licensure for that vehicle. And so we're a week, if not a couple weeks away from getting that thing up and running. The lease for community steps has been executed, and we're just waiting for the owner of that facility to finalize their interior recommendations, and then we'll be moving into that space. So hopefully next time we have a for ribbon cutting for you. If you kind of go through the financial report, we're about where we expected to be at this time of year. We're continuing to watch electricity. London noted that they verified that we are receiving a discounted rate. So we also get rebates because of the solar panels on top of our schools. So they're looking at all of that, and just to make sure that we're getting a discount that we're entitled to. So I anticipate that we'll finish the year as expected, and we'll be able to the next budget. And happy to take any questions to the extent that I can answer that.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if there were any questions.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, great news that state legislature came up with some more money. Do we expect that to come in and ultimately hit this year's budget?
It'll be for fiscal 25.
And did they say anything about next year or no? Because what did we have in the budget for next year?
I have to go back and look. We anticipated that we were going to be sitting around that 60% number.
Right.
And so the governor's proposal added, I'm not sure, I think the number was 40, but it was, wasn't going to hit till the second year of the biennium, fiscal 27. And so, the legislature kind of put together, their own proposals. So, all of that is being negotiated now, and I don't know that we'll know what that's going to look like until the end of the session.
We definitely did plan for next year on the lower end.
Right, I remember that. Yeah. So it seems like that's still a good number.
I think so. Yeah, I don't anticipate it going lower. I think this should be used to anyone, but the threat, to the state budget is of course what happens.
Yeah.
And so, we're told that the idea is protected, but we just have to continue to watch and see.
Okay.
It's the electricity because we've been using more of it?
I don't think so. I think it's the delivery charges. You know, we're actually using less electricity, and we had dialed back our HVAC systems. You know, through COVID, we were running them at 100% fresh air. We were doing that through the early part of this year, and then we set them back to traditional levels. And so, you know, those are some of the largest consumers of electricity here in the district, appliance-wise.
Did we get hit with is it called the community challenge or whatever?
My assumption is, I haven't looked at the bill to tell you yes or no, but I assume that's in the bill because I think those costs are spread across all
users.
Yeah, all
Alright.
customers.
Any other questions for Kevin on this?
Yeah, so I was just wondering on the private tuition, I was trying to remember what the variance there for
Yeah, so private tuition, that's the line where, you know, we pay for students who we outplace.
Right. Are we trying, so I was just trying to, what $500,000, there's a budget variance of $940,000, I was just trying to track that.
Yeah, so that's the excess cost.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's, you know, we budget assuming the reimbursement.
So the $200,000 that we'll get now, if and when we get it, will hit.
Yeah, so I don't assume that 41 will be, you know, 101, will be north of $1 million.
Right.
I know that Lyle and Mary made an adjustment for that number, so I'd have to go back and look at the previous months to just see. They adjust conservatively, so, you know, I think at this point, until the money's in the bank,
Right.
you know, the full adjustment.
Okay. If and when it comes in, it would go towards.
So yeah, that line.
Yeah.
First up, under review and discuss is Wilton Public Schools professional learning update.
Great, so we want to welcome Trudy and Karen back. It's been a while, and our principals, and they're each in turn will take us through the update.
Good evening, everyone. It goes without saying that in order to continuously improve, we need to provide time for teachers to engage in professional learning, especially when that learning can be applied flexibly and based on specific needs of specific groups. Karen and I are going to talk to you about how we've used our half days and full days for professional learning over the course of this year. We're going to focus primarily at the district level. So at the district level, we initiated a multi-year plan to study, refine, and systematize how we design tasks used in our classrooms. In math, that work was centered in first grade. We used the early release days for the math coach to work directly with first grade teachers to study the use of non-curricular tasks, also known as math for fun, evaluate the tasks using a recipe, and use the same approach to help teachers design and select curricular tasks later in the year. The work continued throughout the year, and our plan is to grow the task design work to grade 2 next year. The district has also adopted a new data warehouse called Panorama. The move to Panorama has allowed us to more flexibly capture a range of student data, including academic, climate, behavior, and absences. Staff were trained on the Panorama platform throughout the fall during early release professional days and some at points during the full professional learning days.
This time's also helped us comply with state mandates. Without the time provided here to focus on the learning needed to make the cosmic shift between balanced literacy and structured literacy, teachers wouldn't have the support or the learning they need to effectively implement the new programmatic resources with integrity. Our teachers have engaged in platform training, they've unpacked units, They've re-envisioned the assessment of literacy acquisition, they've studied learning progressions, and they've learned to foster cognitive and social engagement over basic compliance or behavioral engagement. Additionally, we trained all K-3 teachers in administering the DIBELS assessment for foundational skills, and we learned how to integrate those associated lessons into our third grade all block to counter some unfinished learning in grade 3. Beyond state mandates, curriculum's always evolving. The half days have allowed staff to unpack new social studies standards in some grades 4, 6, 7, and 8. And they've allowed extensive time to digest new programmatic resources with their coaches in others, grades 1 through 3 specifically. This work will impact additional cohorts of teachers next year, and the time also allowed coaches to facilitate lesson studies and debrief lab sites and learning walks with both teachers and their administrators so we could all learn how students are responding to the new curriculum. At Middlebrook, teachers were able to study culturally responsive instructional methods as well as consider how building thinking classrooms, an instructional method with which our math colleagues have had great success, applies to the humanities. This learning helps teachers refine their instruction and plan for the inclusion of the new social studies standards as units are revised this summer.
This year was the last year of our 3-year illustrative math rollout in the elementary schools. Kindergarten and grade 5 teachers worked with their math coaches to unpack units of instruction, plan for lesson implementation, learn about, try out, and refine mathematical language routines embedded in the program. Coaches also work with teachers who are already using IM to help refine their implementation. We piloted a new digital platform for IM through Imagine Learning, formerly known as LearnZillion. This platform features a better organization of materials, more formative assessment opportunities, and additional built-in practice. IM also released the newest version of its program known as IM 360. Because we intend to use the new version of IM, we made the IM 360 available to the kindergarten and grade 5 teachers, and grade 6 we gave them a chance to pilot the IM 360 version on the IL platform. This move meant teachers needed time for platform training to learn how to access and use the materials, and the training took place during the early release days in the fall. Our continuing shift towards alignment with the next generation science standards, practices, and cross-cutting concepts requires adapting our curricular materials and professional learning in these new units of instruction in grades 6, 7, and 8, as well as the use of a new formative assessment tool in grades 6 through 8.
So responsive teaching continues to be a big thing. We started that with our accelerated learning framework after the pandemic. But responsive teaching in math, science, ELA, and social studies to support and grow student achievement and ensure that our students have access to grade level and course level content involves working within and across buildings to continuously improve instruction. The early release time helped to facilitate this work.
We've also found that the instructional tools associated with building thinking classrooms framework is an efficient and desirable way to address the goals articulated in the accelerated learning framework. Coaches in each of the buildings are working with the math teachers to implement the tools in their classrooms. We've aligned the building thinking classrooms tools with task design, and we've worked to design both curricular and non-curricular tasks in math. There's a wide range of implementation from building to building and across content areas. These early release days have provided essential time for teachers and coaches in collaborative teams to refine the building thinking classrooms implementation in math classrooms.
And that building thinking classroom work will find additional traction in more classrooms in the school year to come as humanities teachers embed the work in units and modules to facilitate knowledge acquisition and meaning making. Additionally, teachers will study other instructional methods like total participation techniques, discussion protocols, and station rotations.
As you can see, having the early release time and the full days for professional learning has enabled us to roll out district priorities around task design and responsive instruction. and support teachers in the implementation and refinement of new programs and curriculum. The buildings, I think, are now going to share more specific details about the work that took place within each of the buildings.
Thank you.
Little kids first, or big ones first?
You know,
We can start in the middle.
high school or middle crystal? Surprise us.
Yeah.
Why don't we go,
But we'll start reverse order.
So at Wilton High School, we value and support the professional development time allotted to us by the district. We thank you. Our model's a little bit different in that basically the planning at the high school takes place with our instructional leaders and our administrative team, so we pride ourselves on the quality of the work. I do want to take this opportunity to commend our ILs. They do a lot of work that is very close to the departments and content area based, which I know that our teachers really appreciate. And we have appreciated the shortened days as well. Dr. Smith, thank you for making some adjustments to the calendar. You listened to some of the teachers and they appreciate that. Some of the value is the vertical alignment between the courses, but also with our outstanding feeder school, so we appreciate that. The opportunity just to share best practices that teachers don't always have, and we've had more time to do that now. And at the high school, IET time is often, kind of tight, so this has taken some pressure off of the IET time, which has been good. So Brian and I are just going to share a couple of specific examples about valuable professional learning that took place in some of the departments. We are going to begin with the music department because they had an outstanding choir concert last night. So we're going to start and talk a little about that. So, for example, the music staff has gotten together to review repertoire selections and ensure inclusion of diverse voices and very good representation of all the members of our school community in the curriculum and in their performances. And they also, each year, go down to Western Connecticut State University and they gain valuable PD down there. They love going off-site at times, and they bring that back, and that really pays dividends for our students because you know how outstanding our music program is, right? In world languages, some of the things that they've been working on, and note the alignment with district initiatives here. They've been working on the task design protocol and reviewing curriculum and course overviews to check alignment, again, between the courses. So it's valuable time to accomplish that. And they also set a core competency goal this year around balanced, healthy human beings. So the vision of a learner, specifically around study skills in world languages, social emotional learning, and the value of student feedback. So 2 examples of what world languages has done. And then finally, in the LLC, our LMSs, we've tried across the district to reimagine our LLCs. And so our library meeting specialists have spent 4 days going down and working in the reimagining the LLC in the age of AI workshops led by none other than our friend and professional Fran Compar. So you get a sense of the value of the work for the teachers, but ultimately really helps our students. And Brian is going to talk some specific about math and English. And okay, Brian.
Thank you very much. So English jumped into work that both Trudy and Karen talked about with task design. So some of their PD time was spent on taking a look at what that might entail. We have some protocols and some recipes that go into it. Not to get too bogged down with jargon, but getting some shared assignments and doing some of that task design work. Another time the English department paid attention to those growth measures that we look at, the standardized tests, and came up with some plans and strategies for how they were going to sharpen kids' skills this year before our SAT that we just had last week. And they also spent some time during professional learning time this year coming up with some common summative and some common formative assessments. So time that was well spent to make sure that they're aligned by courses. So there's horizontal alignment, but also some vertical alignment to make sure that we're following our progressions that we like to have with our standards and our skills and building. Math did something very similar to what was mentioned with the building thinking classroom. So I would just say that's been our North Star this year. We've paid a lot of attention during all of our PD time in math to anything that is building thinking classrooms related. We've got a lot of work that's been going on, both with inviting some experts in from the outside and then observing our own teachers. We'd like to expand the observations of our colleagues next year. That has proved to be useful. But we've also had our math teachers met by course. So we had our geometry teachers meeting, we had our meeting together, we had our Algebra 2 teachers meeting together, and they were focused on separate things based on what they needed. So Victoria McVie, one of our instructional coaches, and Trudy conducted some empathy interviews. So you may have heard of the design thinking process, but asking the participants in activities what their experiences have been like. We did that with our students in some of the classes, and so our teachers had a chance to go through the data that was collected about their experiences in class, so that it was a formalized PD on responsive classroom practices, right? Teachers were able to take a look at what the students said to Trudy and Victoria in their interviews, and then contemplate some different strategies that they'd like to implement to make that learning just a little bit more effective. So that was time well spent. The Algebra 2 teachers spent a lot of time this year working on scaffolding, which is a key component to the building thinking classrooms model. So a little bit of mixture of differentiation and scaffolding, but more focus on what building thinking classroom says about scaffolding. And there was also some time for the math department earlier in the year to pay attention to alternate means of assessment and how there could be some creative ways to do assessment rather than just the quizzes and the tests that you might think of traditionally. And then our school counselors, they went in a slightly different path. Maybe like our music teachers did something a little bit different, but our school counselors went on a visit. Most of them went on a visit to UConn stores, and one of our counselors went to UConn Stanford, and they engaged in counselor days there where they were able to see what it's like these days to be a student at either of those universities, and to get an insider's understanding of the different learning communities that are at the schools. I'm just going to put this on here to make sure I'm not missing something. What the residential life changes have been like, anything that relates to admissions, whether it's from high school or transfer admissions. So they kind of got like the whole counselor experience at both of the UConn schools, and that transfers out to other schools and universities. So it's not just that they learned things that only pertain to UConn. So that's valuable, and our counselors are always personalizing their interactions with our students that are departing and going to post-secondary worlds. So that's those three departments in a very, very small nutshell.
Cool thing to do.
Can I just ask a process question, and maybe then everybody can kind of answer the question as they go. So you have the district kind of priorities for professional development, and then you have building level priorities for professional development, and it seems that kind of each core, at least in the high school, different disciplines kind of orientate in a different way. So is there like a platform for approval, like prior to, or the plans that the departments bring to you ahead of time, or how does that schedule get set and understood?
So the district has, of course, a professional learning calendar, and that gets aligned. That ultimately comes to us in the buildings. And what we did this year was we created our own document to kind of follow up on that, and we had the calendar and the dates on there. And so we work individually with departments, so we all oversee departments of different administrators, so we have conversations around the PD and the value of it, and again, impacting student learning, the whole child, school climate, some of those, the through lines. So we work directly with the ILs and those departments. Then we also have the overview to make sure the through line is there through what we're doing, really across the school. And we have a bigger document here that we won't get into. Those are just snippets of it. So when we looked at it, we thought, okay, is this aligned? And you can see, you hear conversations around task design, supporting all students, alignment of curricula, high expectations around student performance. So, we just make sure, and we meet every 3 weeks as a leadership administrative team, and I always put the next specific PD on there in advance, so that we're talking about what we're doing, is it still aligned with the North Star? And again, I want to commend our ILs. I think it's been a good decision to say, the research that would suggest that let's let the people closest to the classroom and the departments kind of determine what we need to do can be helpful. So we've got definitely the district vision, but high school teachers, you will find they're content area oriented. So we need to make sure that there's alignment in what we're doing. So that's our process.
Thank you.
Thank you, good question.
And for us, I could say what he said. I mean, on a simplistic level, but also we rely very heavily on the coordinators, the coach, and some of our teacher leaders. A little bit different in terms of a department versus the middle school model, but the same sort of idea, sort of that responsive teaching model, but from a teaching point of view. Make sense?
Yes.
So I appreciate having just a couple of minutes to just talk about the importance of the dedicated professional learning time that we value and really feel is essential to move forward to not only support the teacher growth, but also support student learning and student achievement. So in reviewing the professional learning calendar, I want to, a little bit like what Bob and Brian just did, I want to express our appreciation for our coordinators, for our coach, and our teacher leaders for creating magic. And they really are certainly be commended for the efforts. So while we truly appreciate the dedicated days in our calendar, we really need it for a number of reasons. You heard a couple of times already about the vertical alignment. It's important to have that consistency within the building across grade levels, but then also for us across buildings, and for us having not only a feeder school but a receiving school. So we really have it at both ends in terms of that vertical alignment. Certainly very critical in maintaining a coherence of our curriculum and the instructional practices. It's essential for our staff to be able to meet with Cider Mill and Wilton High School periodically, and having this time sheltered when all the buildings are available at the same time. It's really the only time we're going to be able to do that, so it's important to recognize that as well. Also, with that opportunity for cross-departmental professional learning, the half day also allows valuable cross-departmental collaboration as well, really furthering supporting our goal of improving student outcomes through shared knowledge, through expertise, and by sheltering this time, we can ensure that the professional learning ensures that it's focused, it's purposeful, it's ultimately benefiting both teacher development and student performance, student learning. Frankly, this is our time that we do our professional learning throughout the school year. And without this, we wouldn't have that opportunity to do our professional learning during the school year. It's meaningful, it's structured, way to do it during the school year. And if we wanted to improve student learning and improve teacher growth as well, this is the time where it happens. So it's important to shelter that time the way we do. Please keep in mind, even with the half days that we have in the calendar, it's still hard to do it. It's still hard to fit it all in. Even as we were talking about my preparation for these comments, there were folks saying, hey, if you get more full days, that'd be good too. But I recognize that we're limited within that. But the other thing it does by having the half days built in, it also preserves our Wednesday meetings as well, to then be able to be dedicated to the IET work, to staff meetings, to departmental meetings as well. And then finally, and that's an important piece to this, it keeps the staff in the classroom during the school day. And continuing these half-day sessions ensures that they have the time needed to engage in the impactful professional learning without sacrificing the time of the students being out of the classroom. And that's really what's best for student learning. So, thank you.
Can I ask a question about, because you just have the math coach at middle, you're an ELA coach down. Is Karen picking up additional duties from the fact that there is no ELA?
Karen is playing the role of Superwoman right now because she's pulled in so many directions at the same time and managing it quite well. I'll take this opportunity to say it publicly and say what great effort she has done to try to keep her hand and foot and everything. And then leading a little bit more again on some of our teacher leaders and admin, of course, to carry that weight as well. It's not easy.
And just kind of coming off of, like, Bob, what would you say, like, the North Star has been of your kind of professional development in your building this year? at North Star, Bob.
Your North Star analogy, I liked it. I'm asking what.
I'm asking Jory, though, right?
I'm asking Jory what his North Star is. Yeah.
I don't know, I guess I'm not ready to answer that, because I think if I were to break it out by different disciplines, it might be a different answer for that. You know, when I step back from have the right answer for you right now, the biggest thing is student achievement, and performance is what we're certainly aiming for, but then how do we do that? And how do we do that? We've done a lot of work with the building thinking classrooms. It's expanded beyond just our math and science folks, now expanding into our humanities, expanding into the Strive class, et cetera. So that's been the big noise that's happened fairly regularly in everything we've done. I have about 8 pages of notes here of the different professional learning opportunities that we had by discipline. On the outside chance you start asking questions about, well, what about the mental health group, or what about the music? If you want, I can speak to it, but it is a little bit different depending upon who you're talking about. You know, you get in the secondary level, you have a little more specialized work based on department. So it's hard to say that there is necessarily any just one North Star. It's really
A bunch of them.
somewhat, it's many of them. Right?
Constellation.
It's a constellation. That's right, 'cause that's the word I needed.
Nice.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, George.
Can you just speak of how it's organized? I have a hard time wrapping my head around how you do that day or do that afternoon. Can you just speak to what that looks like?
Sure. Bob talked about it a little bit in terms of you think about all of the disciplines and all the departments that are running different things on these days. And we've created a document that's an in-house document that specifically talks about what each department is doing. I mean, if I pull up September 11th, for example, the intervention folks are working specifically on their panorama training. The LLC folks were working on executive function intervention. The ARC folks are working on a FAPA website rollout. We had executive function across for math and for science, social studies, SPED, and ELA. Music had FAPA curriculum set. You get the idea, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to keep just going with that, but it's creating this document and saying, all right, for September 11th, what's happening? For the next date, what's happening? Sometimes there are full district-wide professional learning, and other times there are specific to the building.
Thanks.
That's your question.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll start off with processes. So a few years ago, I stole something. You probably can't see it, but there's pocket charts. Those of you who have worked with young children know what pocket charts are. And we basically use different colors to organize our early release days, our leadership meetings, our Wednesday meetings, our full days, so that we can kind of see the gestalt kind of like what's going on and kind of map it all out without it. We've done digital versions. This has actually worked out the best, and I credit my friend Kathy Kuhn here. She helped me get my kind of all over brain into a nice systematic process. So I know we use something similar, but there's so many different structures that we use that need to be connected. Our North Star is the accelerated learning framework, right? And so, but kind of encompassed by our SEL kind of well-being of our children. And basically, we use our kind of weekly coach coordinator meetings and our bi-weekly leadership meetings where all of our team leaders and our ILs, our instructional leaders meet. And we kind of use that chart to kind of map it all out, right? How do we connect our learning walks to our Wednesday meetings? How do we connect our coaching cycles to our work? And it's complicated, right? And it has to be cohesive. And it's even more complicated at the elementary because we don't really have departments per se. We've really, in the last few years since we started staggering the implementation of different curricular areas, in some ways it has fragmented the whole school learning. Obviously our SEL work is and the vision of the graduate, and there are components of themes, topics that can be whole school, but a lot of the work we're doing, because it's so specific to the curriculum that we're rolling out is differentiated by grade level. So I'll just use this here as an example. We have our third grade is obviously working on the ELA rollout. Fifth grade is working on math. This is our last full year implementation. Our fourth grade was working on social studies. We have lots of assessments that go along with each of those, but overall, all of our academic areas are tied together by focusing on responsive lesson planning and really digging into what a unit rollout looks like. And the coaching work really supports all of that by getting in and working with our IETs. We actually plan we've committed to using about 15 minutes at every one of our bi-weekly leadership meetings to really look at our IET agendas to make sure that there are threads of that work happening consistently in each of our different IET meetings. Without the full days and the early release days, I'm really not sure how we would accomplish this. I have just, one of you guys mentioned the trying to minimize teacher pullout, and I will say that with the addition of these early release days, we have been able to minimize the amount of missed time that our teachers have. We used to, I would say there would be, depending on what was going on, but 5 to 6 days where teachers would miss FaceTime with students, which now that I think about it, actually kind of mirrors the amount of early release days that we have. So I hadn't really thought about that till you said that, but if you kind of look, I bet you could track that, and I think that's an important piece to remember. Obviously, we've got the vision of the learner that's happening full school. We're doing all of our ruler work, SRBI work, we implement the DESA, which is a social emotional assessment, DBT, and all that work goes on district-wide, school-wide. And then we have our world language that's been working a lot with their new curriculum, so they have dedicated time. There's been a consultant that's come in a few times there. Our special areas obviously are going through the curriculum review cycle, and they also work in their IETs, and they've had the opportunity to visit outside schools as well. AI has been a little bit of a thread, kind of going throughout the whole school, so that's been nice. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. There's obviously a lot more specifics, but.
Do you have any grade currently that isn't actually piloting a specific new grade?
Absolutely not.
You know, and that's a really important question and a really important answer. And here's something that you know we lose sight of because it's just part of what we do. But we have been implementing new curriculum, I want to say, for almost all the years I've been here, and that's a lift. And you know, Karen, said it. You'll probably hear Kathy in a second. This shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy is monumental, and so the amount of time, the amount of new learning, just in this one area, is very, very significant.
So, but after this year, IM will be fully implemented and.
But then we have new social studies.
Yes, I know that something will take its place.
It'll be fully implemented K-8 and Algebra 1 at the middle school.
So K-8 and Algebra 1 at the middle school. And then I know that you mentioned IM 360, is that happening at the Cider Mill level as well, or is that just in the middle?
It's not a big shift, it's just an updated version.
Okay.
There's some improvements, which have been great, but it's just, frequently curriculum providers, writers update their program.
It's just keeping current with
It's just
maintaining the program.
Well, that's a lot.
I didn't even tell you half of it. I'm trying to be concise.
Well, I think it's important to understand, especially, when you have like these whole building initiatives, but you also have different grades making different shifts at different times, and then it moves up a level. So what happens in one year then impacts the next year, and the steps that it takes and the moving pieces that it takes, and certainly the recognition at the end of the day.
Thus the need for some type of organizing.
But the recognition that you see at the end of the day with the illustrative math program and just the achievement that has come out of it. So
Okay, ready?
Ready.
So in an effort not to repeat, I will say when we approach professional learning, at least at Miller Driscoll, we look first at what we have to do or need to do, right? Then what else we want to do, and then how much time we have to do it, and then how much support we have to do it. And I think the support piece, I'm just gonna underscore that, is so incredibly important because we know these, any one-shot professional learning opportunity is not going to be effective. So it is making these crazy charts and being able to cycle through and take advantage of all of the different types of time that we have and all of the different types of support. So that if we provide some professional learning, that then we are able to help teachers implement it in the classroom and support them as they go. So I do think that's something that, I know it happens at all the schools, but it's incredibly important in the planning part when we go through. At Miller Driscoll, we also look at what we can do as a whole staff, and then we look at how we divide things, so similar to what Jen said. So this year, we're working on community wellness and belonging as a whole staff through our collaborative commitments for students, for families, and then for our own staff. We then divide things by grade level, and each year, grade level or departments have a particular area of focus. So this year, a couple of examples. So preschool is working on the CT DOTS assessment, which is a documentation and observation system that they're doing, as well as executive functioning via play. Kindergarten is doing the new IM, like Trudy said, and then also Always Play workshop. First grade is doing building thinking classrooms and has now launched EL. They started it just last week. Second grade has been doing EL the whole year, and then doing the new social emotional learning platform started in K and moved up through second, so everyday speech they're doing. Special ed is probably the trickiest because special ed and related services need to understand both what's happening in the regular ed classroom, but then they also have to further refine their craft. So they've done a lot of EL training and IM training, and they got trained in DBT by Tanya Leonard, who's amazing, and I don't know, wish she could deliver all of our PD. Jory, come on.
She is great.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, really great.
Yeah, and then our interventionists are making, again, connections to the regular ed curriculum and with families so that the work they do, goes back into the classroom at home. And the specials are doing the same thing, connecting to the curriculum. Other than that, some other things I think that have been mentioned, but I think they bear repeating. There are all these other things that you have to train your staff on, like a new teacher evaluation plan, continuing work on community wellness and belonging, what used to be called DEI, so things around allies training we've done, implicit bias training we've done. There's professional learning around EOPS, right? We did that yesterday. DESA, DIBBLES, there are just all of these other things that then you have to also do to make sure that you keep the school running. We're super thankful for the supports we have, so we're thankful for the people who come in and provide professional learning. We're especially thankful for our coaches because that's where, again, we cycle through all of that support. I'm incredibly thankful for my administrative team who jumps right in and also delivers professional development. And thank you for the time, because I agree, without the full days and the half days, we use faculty meeting time and IEP time, but having those bigger, longer chunks of time are great to be able to deliver that.
So that was gonna be my question to the whole panel, kind of like, this is the first year that we really kind of changed the calendar a little bit.
Well, we added the 4 early releases.
And so, but to some extent I presume, and maybe I shouldn't presume, but the work that's being done is still the same amount of work that was done previously? Or are you able to, with this kind of take on more and just, or how would you assess kind of running it this way versus the former way?
I think it's reasonable to say, and these guys can comment on it, time is our most precious and most scarce resource, and it is not a misstatement to say, even today, we don't have enough time to do all the things that we need to do and want to do and have to do in the way that we would choose to do that. And so the 4 early release days have definitely had a material impact in helping move our professional learning agenda. But you need to add about 400 in order for us to get there. And I think, just to draw a comparison, it's not so much in the news today, but years ago, Finland was held up as like, this is, if you want to be a world-renowned best education system, do what Finland is doing. And so lots of us in this country and other countries kind of studied what Finland was doing. And one of the chief differences was the amount of time that nation and a few others feed to professional learning. Yeah. Right? We as a nation, we only value what happens between the bells, right? The kids in front of us. And we don't value the extra professional learning time. And so we have to carve it out of that between the bell or adjacent to the bell time. And so, to me, that's the answer.
I know that we've gotten some letters from parents about the half days being challenging, and I personally think the having the half days for professional development is critical. Like I wish we'd had more of that when I was teaching. But I just wonder if there's any way for us to be strategic about providing solutions either through continuing ed for parents, and whether that's like maybe we combine the high school and middle school staff and we take the middle school building and we make that available for classes or camps or something to happen during that time, and then potentially provide transportation with the bus systems for kids to go home after if they do need to stay and can't arrange for that type of transportation. Because once a month to try to get childcare can be challenging for a family.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it would take some time, some planning, and some vision around what we're trying to do. And I think we'd also have to do a needs assessment too, like just kind of survey who would take advantage of something like that. But we can certainly talk about it. I think that's we're going to get into the calendar conversation in just a second. That's on whether we have the additional days or not. Those early release days. For some, particularly for 2-parent working families, those are really hard, and so I think that's why we try to be really thoughtful and judicious about how we deploy those and when. And I'll talk about it more when we get to that agenda item. But there's always competing factors, as you know. I do want to put just some summary comments on some of what they shared today, and it's really around the why of the time. And so, let me just start with this. There are lots of districts, in Connecticut and around, who like to claim that they have the best of the finest staff, the best of the finest teachers. And I would just say, let's look at the body of comparable objective measures. And so for us here in this state, earlier this year, we were one of 3 districts in Connecticut who were among 100 that are outperforming their pre-COVID achievement levels. And the other 2 districts who are included in that group, when it comes to absolute achievement, they can't hold a candle to us. We know, because we've talked about at length, the performance of our kids at the high school, at middle school, Sutter Mill as a school of distinction, are at the very, very top of the state in English, in math, in science. I used to not enjoy opening my email, but this year has been a very different experience. In the last couple of weeks, I've walked into my office and fired up my email, and I learned that we have the second lowest chronic absenteeism rate in the state. We have the second lowest rate of restraint seclusion reports in the state. So there's a pattern there, and the pattern is, as a board, you provide incredible resources. I think we do an outstanding job hiring new staff. We have an exceptional group of veteran staff, and we provide a lot of training and support. And Milton's not an easy place to work. The expectations are really high, and it's hard. Right? We all have children, and we know what we want for our kids, and our teachers know what we want because they want it too. And so, I say that in service to the calendar conversation, but also in recognition of the complexity of the work and the outcomes we get as a result. So they don't waste time every minute we can get, and we are having observable, measurable, material benefit as a result of that time that's given to professional learning. But don't take my word for it. Right? It's objective and measurable, and we are who we are. And getting better, and we're getting better at getting better.
I can't remember I think it was when they were rolling out the reading program, and when it was the first kind of rollout and training session that happened, the staff feedback was that it just wasn't as impactful, I think, as they wanted it to be. Has subsequent PD time been used to continue that training, and if so, what's the feedback been from the staff relative to the initial set of feedback we got? Meaning, is it improving? Are they having a better experience? Have they been able to address any of that? Do they feel better about where they're at now relative to where they thought they'd be after that first one?
I think the experience was different depending upon who was providing the professional development. So I think the professional development provided by Better Lessons at Cider Mill was there was a different response to that than the professional development provided by Better Lessons at Miller Driscoll. I would say that we have repaired based on that professional development, changed how we're doing it. So we're utilizing our coaches and we're just providing that professional development in a different way. It's interesting though, because we joined, a bunch of us from Miller Driscoll, and Jen wanted to come and hasn't been able to come, but we joined this affinity group through the State Department of Education. And in listening to other people who are implementing EL and have used the same, group to provide that PD, they have found similar things. It's dependent upon the presenter. They have found that the coaching that the people provide to the coaches has been better than the whole group instruction. So we just changed our whole plan at Miller Driscoll after we tried multiple times and with care and support, tried to meet with them, tried to plan differently. And still didn't get the result that we wanted, we changed our plan and kind of put it over onto the coaches and then figured out ways to support the coaches so the coaches could support second grade. And then we used all that we learned when we launched this with second grade to change very, very significantly how we launched it with first grade, and first grade is in a totally different place with the launch. So we took what we learned and used it to do things differently when we launched with first grade. And I think it's made a huge difference.
Great. And second grade is now in a better place too than it was, I guess, in the fall, coming to where they are now in the
Right. I mean, I do think, and it was both, at both schools this happened, but at both schools it was the coaches and the teachers were learning, right? And the administrators and the coordinator, right? We're all learning the program together. And the teachers, they have been used to having coaches who are experts and who are probably like 27 steps ahead of them. In this case, it was like the coaches are learning at the same time. So that was kind of a difficult dynamic. So we changed and we made a colorful chart, a nice color-coded chart, and figured out ways to get the teachers a couple of weeks ahead of the teachers. So what did the coaches need to do that, and then how did the coaches then bring that learning to the teachers? So we made a lot of changes, but the launch of first grade was great, and I got to share with kindergarten yesterday that we're going to be in full implementation starting in the fall. And the best news that I was able to share with them is that the first knowledge block module in kindergarten is all about what, Kevin?
Play.
So, and I feel like that's news at this table. So.
That's great.
Yeah, that full implementation starting with kindergarten in the fall.
Yeah, we looked at our plan.
Oh.
We finished our 4-12 curriculum review on Wednesday, and there'll be an ELA update shortly thereafter.
Yes, I will be at that.
So maybe.
It will be. Like, that's okay.
It's okay.
It's very limited. It's fine. Yeah.
So when you're planning your professional development, I think this is more elementary school based. you plan for a certain amount of time, is that the time you're getting? Are there kind of roadblocks or things going on at the school which prevent you getting going at the time you're anticipating? Like, there's kids coming back to school because I don't know, there was no one meeting them on the bus, or is there anything that prevents you getting going and making the most of that half day of time?
All the time. And plans in place for those things.
Yeah.
Everything's going.
Only mine when I first had them all.
I mean, there was a winter storm that tried to foil our
Yeah.
PD plans, but you know, we worked
Yes.
on giving kids a day off.
Yeah, that was a good decision though. You didn't have much choice.
I credit Janine and Kathy for, like, if this happens, you should think about this.
Probably a color coded chart for that.
So anything else on it was, we wanted you to hear, and hopefully you
Super important. It's super great that they're doing it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's important to connect that to, we're gonna get to the calendar, after this report.
I think the tricky part is the actual Wednesday. That's a tricky day for
Of course it is. It's
to
all-
do this. Probably a Friday or a Monday would be sort of better, but not a lot better. But the idea of it, definitely, we should have probably more. Like a shot for that, but probably more.
Not by anyone.
Not by anyone.
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment about Wednesdays?
Well, we're gonna, I've got that on my calendar list, so.
I just want to talk about why it's.
Yeah, we got it. Don't you?
We'll get there.
You be the amen choir.
Any other questions before we move on to the next item? Maria and vacancy update.
Great. Thank you for having me to present on our vacancies at this point in the season. All of this conversation about professional learning is actually a great segue into hiring, because one of the most common themes that we hear as we hire new staff, whether they're brand new teachers or veteran teachers, is that they're really looking to come to a place where they can grow professionally and where their desire to grow is supported in really tangible ways. And so they're always very excited to hear about the things that are happening, the opportunities that they will have, particularly if they're coming from other districts that don't necessarily have the resources or don't have the priority placed on professional learning. And so I just want to reiterate the importance of it, even as we look to attract new staff when it is a buyer's market for new staff. I will say that every year, and I'm sure that that will continue to be the case. Hiring season is off to quite a start. We are further along with more vacancies than we have ever been before. So we have more vacancies than we've ever had before, and we are further along in our hiring and posting process than we've ever been before. We currently have 16 open positions, plus one more that was announced today. We just got a retirement announcement, so that will be posted tomorrow. And of those, 5 are retirements. 6 are resignations, some of which are people who were on a leave of absence for the year, whether it was for child rearing leave or, different personal pursuits, or someone living outside of the country and not returning. We have 1 leave of absence announced for next year, because teachers contractually have the opportunity to take a year-long leave of absence if they're tenured. That's just a provision within their contract that men take advantage of at different points in their lives. And then 1 is additional FTE. So I like to share that because I think it provides a context for why we have the vacancies and the openings. 2 of the positions are positions that were open this year after the school year started and we had resignations. We did not fill as full-time positions. We filled in other ways, either through additional FTE or long-term subs or things like that. So again, I think that that's important to note. We have a very detailed tracking mechanism in the HR office to track when postings open, when they close, where we are in the process. We want to be sure that postings and openings don't get stale, because people begin to lose interest, or they lose interest in us as a district if they feel like, hey, I applied for that position 6 weeks ago, I never heard back, I'm going to move on. So we really try to ensure that it's a 5 to 6 week post to hire process, which is often very ambitious. And, you know, I think the administrators here will attest to the fact that sometimes we can be a little bit of a pain in the neck, calling to check in on how the interview process is going and where we are and whether we have our committees together. But we all work really collaboratively, and it is a labor-intensive process. There are always two interviews at the building level plus the third interview at central office, and that ensures that we're finding the right fit, because we want to ensure that it's a long-term relationship when we bring people on board. We just recently attended the UConn job fair at the NEAC School of Education. Jory and Trudy joined me along with Abby Cass from Miller Driscoll, and we met about 100 candidates across subject areas: special education, elementary, social studies. A number of those candidates engaged in short interviews that day on site with the administrators. We followed up with them the very next day with an email, let them know how to apply. A number of them have already applied to positions. And as I said, a number of the positions that I just mentioned are already in the interview process, the demonstration lesson process. We hired one, conducting reference checks. So it's great to be where we are so early in the season. And I think it's really important because, again, we are like many other districts that are looking for teachers. And unfortunately, when we go to UConn, I always think this is kind of a good measure of what the pool looks like. There are fewer and fewer candidates, unfortunately. They're always very high quality candidates, which is why we invest the time to go up to UConn annually. But it just highlights the importance of making those connections, continuing with the relationship, having things in our district that make us attractive and set us apart from other districts. The professional learning is a big one. The tuition reimbursement is another one that people are really looking for and is appealing to them. The salaries, the benefits, and again, I think just the personal connections that we make. Because every year, teachers will say, I just really liked the way that I felt when I came to the building, when I was with the interview committee, when I was talking to the administrator. And that's not something that you can fake. You know, people know it's authentic, people are happy here, and we really develop a community. So it's an exciting time. It's busy. As the year starts to wind down, for most people in schools, it really winds up in human resources because we're trying to fill all of these positions, and this will continue to be busy throughout the summer, I'm sure. So, happy to take any questions.
The pool is getting smaller. Is that because less people are
Want to be teachers?
Well, there are fewer people going into the field. It's a national trend, unfortunately, yes.
How far out do we actively recruit? Do we only recruit when we have open positions, or like when you guys go up and meet candidates at UConn, are you thinking about staffing needs next year and kind of those things?
We're really working for immediate positions. We have the ability when we go to UConn to indicate what all of our open positions are, as well as our anticipated positions. So we just try to project based on what we're seeing, for example, at FTE at the high school. If we see that FTE is increasing, or we have one FTE-driven increase at Cider Mill for next year. Those are the kinds of things that either we know for sure are going to be open positions or that we're anticipating. So we try to get a jump on those. But we also want to be really authentic in our recruitment, so we don't want to waste the time of the candidates or our staff in having those interviews if we don't really have a sense that we're going to have something open. With that said, when we're at UConn, we do try to, we make connections with candidates even if we don't have open positions. If we meet a great candidate, we will collect the resume, we'll follow up with that candidate. I personally have had that experience when I was in the buildings. I can think of a particular teacher that I met at a job fair. We didn't have the open position, and now that's Adam Shopis leading up our STEM program at Middlebrook. So, and I'm sure we have a number of those kinds of examples across the district where we just meet great candidates, and we may not have the opening right at that time, but we try to develop those relationships and stay in touch.
Yeah, and we try to shamelessly stay friends with our friends.
We do. We do, and
No, absolutely, yeah, you gotta, in some way, shape, or form, you gotta try to recruit it.
Yeah. people who have come to us from other districts have also brought their friends along.
Sure.
And, and we're okay with that. Their districts may not be okay with
That's right. I don't have any more friends. The superintendent rants.
Let's close bridges or like, how do is our opening amount, in line with what other districts we talk to, the other?
Impossible to know, certainly. Yeah, and I think just as, it's also a question of scale. It's a year ago, a place like Waterbury had something like 200 vacancies. So, to fathom.
Yeah.
So, if you're following headlines, right? We're, pretty close to concluding this budget season. There are places around us that are having very different budget experiences, and so there are like, say, a colleague, from here in the state called me, trying to place some of her, best teachers because she thought she was going to lose them as a result of the budget. So that's also a dynamic that's in play right now.
Does anyone ever get offered a job and turn us down, and if so, for what reason?
Rarely, because, when they get to, because there are so many steps in the process, there are opportunities for the candidates. They're vetting us just as much as we're vetting them, and we recognize that. But the final step in the process is the interview at the superintendent's office. And our administrators, in preparing the candidates for that final interview, will say, first of all, it's a real interview. It's not just pro forma. You're not just going in to say hello and sign paperwork. The superintendent will often spend 45 minutes to an hour with each candidate. If you're presented with an offer, will you accept it? And so we try to get that sense before the person comes into central office. Occasionally when we have people who want to think about it or decide that they're going to go elsewhere, it's driven by geography. They want to be closer to home, or it's really expensive to live here and they live 45 minutes to an hour away, those kinds of things. But it's really rare that we lose a candidate to a local school district.
And the bulk of retirements usually come in when?
Usually they come in later. So I'm grateful that this year we've had so many announcements early, and each person that has come in has said, I really want to give the district time. So typically they will come in closer to June, sometimes over the summer. And it doesn't mean that we won't get some this summer. But I think with so many now, it signals to me that we're likely to just get fewer later on. We shall see. You can hold me to that in September. We will. My prediction is right.
Do you go anywhere else besides stores?
They're really, the job fairs have dwindled over the years. I think it's just a function of technology and people being able to do
So you
interviews.
just go to the websites and check those schools out?
Yeah. There used to be a job fair locally in Fairfield, and that just wasn't well attended. I mean, there have been a few CES, which is our local RESC. We have one, and they weren't well attended, so
So it's completely changed that way.
Yeah.
Except for stores.
Yeah, that's the big one that we.
Yeah, we had some folks in Columbia a couple of years early in my tenure here. Like those were the big three: was Columbia, the Fairfield County Job Fair, and UConn.
Yeah, and I attended one at Columbia years ago, and what we found was that many of those teachers were looking for urban settings. I mean, first you have the certification issue. They're not certified in Connecticut generally. Many of them were looking for very different kinds of experiences, and were looking to stay more in the city environment.
Are we reciprocal? We're not reciprocal.
No, but the state has made it easier to get, the reciprocation. Yes.
Any other questions for Maria?
Good luck.
Thanks. Yeah, we're excited. It's moving along.
So earlier in the evening, we amended the agenda to add a third item under bonding projects. And so with budget season comes, I guess you could call it bonding season as well. I just, earlier, a couple of weeks ago, we took a vote and had consensus around what the TSNAP had suggested for school building priorities. And just wanted to set back at the table because the Board of Selectmen has been meeting And in addition to approving budget resolutions for the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education, earlier this week, the Board of Finance also set the mill rate, which debt service fees into the mill rate. So the mill rate was set, I believe, at 1.92. So early, I believe it was yesterday, the Board of Selectmen approved several bonding projects, and the bonding projects that were approved related to us, excuse me, in my older age, the district roof replacements, the high school library at $2 million, the cider mill chilled water replacement equipment and piping at about $1.5 million, school drainage, sidewalks, and paving for about $725. Middlebrook exhaust fan replacement for $373. And the Middlebrook gym HVAC for $250,000. They then tabled discussion and voting for the recommended proposal of about $1 million to do certain types of flooring, tile, and lighting replacement throughout several of the buildings as a part of larger replacement projects relating to most of the schools. So it appears that will be discussed and voted on the 7th. The reasoning for this was told that they wanted to obtain have more of an understanding of prior approval, I guess, from bond counsel. It's my understanding that bond counsel had already been consulted and had given approval for these types of bonding projects, not only for this year, but in previous years. So we'll be looking to see how that process unfolds. I think that these are really important projects for our buildings and for our schools, and the priority of our schools and how our schools are situated in our town, and making sure that our buildings reflect the actual learning that goes on in them is important for our staff and our students and our families. So I just wanted to give everybody an update on that process, and also kind of think about what our criteria and process moving forward, given the breadth and the scope of work that needs to go on in our buildings.
Just go back to the letter that you sent to your colleagues about the flooring and the scope of the job being contained so that the bonding would contain all of the elements instead of just leaving the flooring out, or?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I didn't attend, and I didn't watch the meeting, and so I have questions about what led to the tabling. But as I wrote to all of you and to the selectmen yesterday, I participated in the call with Robinson and Cole a week ago Wednesday, and David Panica, who serves as bond counsel for the town, had affirmed that flooring, ceiling tiles, given a couple of kind of low threshold conditions, were permissible for bonding, and that comported with all of the conversations I've had to date with superintendents of the region about how those respective municipalities engage in bundling bond packages. And so I think there are a couple of questions came up for me. I think number one, just need to better understand what transpired and why, and what the Board of Selectmen may be contemplating. I don't know, and I don't want to prejudge that. I will say that if this doesn't come through, it's an incredible lost opportunity. We're tearing apart the Peterson wing so we can put in all of the piping for the chiller. It's going to be pretty close to a gut job. So, from my view, from my best understanding of what is legally acceptable, this should be a no-brainer. And if we can do it, if the money can be borrowed and bonded, then we should be able, at the end of the summer, deliver a close to kind of refurbished Peterson wing, and then we can turn our attention to the rest of the building and the other $100 million worth of stuff that's got to get done just in the district. So I think that's kind of the first thing. The other just question that I have, the bathroom. There was a proposal that was I think discussed at TSNAP, presented to bundle both the Merwin Meadows bathrooms, the restrooms here in the high school field house. And, the decision there was to pay cash rather than to bond. And again, I don't want to judge the decision, but it feels like we're missing an opportunity because we have other projects that, are not permissible to be bonded. They're, smaller in scope and, we've got to get that done too. So, my worry here is that we just haven't collectively moved to a point in time where we have a clear strategy and plan to address all of these needs. I feel like we're still talking about, how to locate them and I don't want to be in a situation where we're competing for dollars with the town because there's so much that needs to be done. But I do think as a minimum expectation, we should be able to have a process that makes sense, that accommodates all of the many needs over what period of years, and it should be well understood. And there should be clarity about what can be borrowed and what should be cash. And again, not wanting to judge what transpired. I was at the first part of the meeting Monday, and I was just surprised at some of the questions because I feel like some of those questions were asked and answered. So, we do need to. It would be my recommendation that this board, proactively engage with the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, or some subset just to really come up with some guiding principles about how we're going to move this forward. The worst thing that can happen is we lose another year, and that's that's not good for anybody.
I do think that trying to find the bright spots, I think there was a lot of consensus, at least in the T-SNAP group, that the schools were a big priority. There's a big long list, but the good news is that people recognize the immediacy of what needs to be done in the schools, which was good.
Yeah, sure.
Take a little win when we can.
Yeah, and I think that the selectmen certainly, I think we just look at what was
Yeah.
So so I don't want to minimize that.
No.
I agree.
But the lack of clarity makes it difficult. It made that difficult for that group for us to function.
So I think given the breadth of work that needs to be done within our buildings and the scope of the work and the amount of time that it'll take to push projects forward, I think Kevin's suggestion that we have a joint meeting where we all sit around the table and kind of talk about a process and kind of have a firm understanding of where projects live in bonding and where they live in other places, and how we appropriately scale and prepare and time things out. So we're not to the point where we're wondering if a demolition for one project in a building is not going to then provide for the ability to replace what gets demoed with something new, as opposed to having them to rebuild with, put back what's old. So, and to being able to move those projects forward would be welcome. So,
how do we do that?
On the 11th, Ruth and I have a standing lunch date with Tony and Matt Knickerbocker and Matt Vermonti. I think that would be a good opportunity. We'll put that on the agenda and just try to see what we can get together. I don't know. Everyone's going to be looking towards the town meeting at this point, which is just about a month away, so we should probably look at it after that.
I do plan on being at the next Board of Selectmen meeting where they take up the remaining bonding proposal of the $1 million for the schools, just to ensure if there's any questions or things that need to be clarified or understood.
Is that the meeting on the 7th?
That's
Monday.
Monday. Any other questions or points about
Very frustrating.
it's a challenge, right?
Yeah,
Just,
very frustrating, yeah.
they're not gonna renovate themselves.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
As much as I might dream, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
No, and I think at this point in time, we had the needs assessment. We've been talking about this for a while, so to make sure that there's a pathway in place where we don't lose any more time.
Well, we've just kicked it down the road for too many years, and now we have to do it, period. And do it right.
Yeah, doing it right, I think is
That is the key.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. If it's being demolished to be part of the project, is it even feasible to put it back together again afterwards without the need for RN?
Well, I was doing worst case planning, that's in part what you pay me for, and so I was trying to imagine welcoming kids back to school next year when we've got, brand new piping and old lighting and ceiling tiles and, dirty flooring because the old pipes leaked all over the existing. So,
Makes no sense.
And again, I don't know what the conversation was, or it could be a good reason. Maybe they want to triple the amount. So I don't really know, and I don't give.
And I'll certainly take that.
Yep. So, but I think that just that they can, if what was presented is accurate. And good morning, Wilton. That there's still a question about the permissibility. I'd like to know specifically what those questions are, and kind of what the hesitation is. And just as a matter of course, as the town approves bonding, those all get reviewed by bond counsel, and so I'm just I just have some questions.
We're going to hope to move towards answers. Next, such a happy discussion. Wilton High School class of 2025 graduation date.
Yay.
So,
Dr. O'Donnell, what date do you want to graduate class of 25?
Saturday, June 14th, Dr. Smith.
We have a motion, please, to set June 14th.
I move to set June 14th for the graduation of the class of 2025. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Speak both of you.
Second.
You should say.
Nicola, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, so parents and families and students, mark your calendars. Saturday the 14th. May it be sunny and lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that last year the walking the graduating seniors through Middlebrook and Cider Mill was a big hit? Is there plans to do that this year?
There's already conversations. We have our first graduation meeting next week, so that will be on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah. And the little kids, everybody loved them.
Yeah.
From the little kids to the graduating kids and the teachers.
The teachers,
Yeah. Next up, the WPS 25-26 district calendar modifications.
Great. So you heard a pretty lengthy discussion about the importance of the time that we have. The real focus here and the question that's emerged. There are other questions about the calendar, but the driving question this year really had to do with the additional early release Wednesdays, which I'm going to turn to Dr. Falcone and she can tell us why Wednesdays are the day and not Mondays or Fridays or Tuesdays or Thursdays. But there were we received some feedback from a few folks who chose to write us and had some conversations with our PTA presidents. I convened a small committee of teachers to come and give me some feedback. And so kind of through all those conversations, there were some smaller kinds of questions that came up. One being, can we, always align our April break with all the other districts? And the answer is sometimes it may be, but not always. And so, this year we're out of sync with a lot of districts. There are always districts who are out of sync. But we'll, I think I spoke to Chippy May CES. They publish a regional calendar that each region state schools that receive kids from a bunch of districts. So we'll try to keep it on that. In past years, we had published our calendar ahead of just about everybody, and so we've set our dates sooner. And I would just say for the record, like, nobody ever calls me to say, hey, when are you doing yours? And so, as much as I want to accommodate, it's primarily a staff request. We do our best. And so we'll push back the timing of, presentation and approval of subsequent calendars. But I just, nobody should have any illusions that it's always going to work out everywhere, because it just never does for all kinds of different reasons. So that was one. Some of the other questions that came up that we were able to accommodate, as you'll see in this calendar, this was a specific request from some of the high school staff. They had expressed some concern on our high school testing days when in the fall when kids take the PSAT, and in the spring they take the SAT. That after that testing period, when we release them back to class, the kids are just gonzo and really not in the best shape for prime learning. So the recommendation was, could we turn those into professional learning days and send the kids home afterwards. So that's in the calendar. You'll see that change. And then, the last one really was around just the, perceived and actual disruption of the month of October. And so this came from both parents and staff that, when you're trying to establish routines and, get into the flow of school between the holidays and Columbus Day and then some early release days, it just felt really disjointed. And so we made some changes, and so you'll see kind of through September, October, there's a few days. And then the final question that we started with was, why not Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday for an early release day? Why does it have to be Wednesday? So Dr. Felton, why is Wednesday important?
Well, I know it feels like they're half days. Really, if it's not on a Wednesday and we can align it with our faculty meeting time, at least in our schools, and the faculty can get the benefit from it, we really only have an hour and a half. Like, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but when it's on a Wednesday, we get 2.5 hours of solid time. And to do this heavy lifting that we're doing, we need that time. I know most of our training, you can't do it in less than 2 hours. So I would push to keep it on Wednesdays. And I will tell you, there's nothing worse as a teacher before vacation on Friday afternoon. And you're trying to ask them to do professional learning. So just as a...
So the Wednesday permits it to be a 2.5 hour block.
Our schools, where Kathy...
3 through 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Military School gets the time, but it's still because
they get the time, but
their meetings are in the morning.
Okay.
And then why are faculty meetings on Wednesdays? That is a contractual obligation we have, and so if that's something we wanted to change, we could talk about. I'd have to think about whether I think that's a good idea or not. But that's why it's not. We don't have discretion just to pick out and plump those meetings on. That's something that has to be bargained. So that's really why
makes a big difference.
Wednesday is Wednesday. And the chunk of time, it's also the reason why we use early release and not late arrival, right? Because we want the for as many as we can provide it to. We want the elongated amount of time. So let me just. I think you might have both calendars here, so you can see the whole calendar. So we are not doing an early release on October 2nd. There's not one on October 10th. We moved it to October 22nd, so that's to accommodate the high school testing day. November, there is no early release day. We just have that's the election day full PD day. December 10th, that's kind of remained. January 14th, that has remained. We kept the day in February. So one of the things that I was initially thinking was like, wouldn't it be great if we could even remove a few of these days and just add another full day, professional learning day. But the net effect of that is it adds a 188 day to our teacher's contract. And so we're going to do that, we have to pay for it. And so that's not in ours. So in order to get the time, we have to keep the early release days. We did take one out of the early part of the year and move it to May. So you see the May 6th day there. And there's some questions about that, so, I'm gonna hold on that on the calendar now, and I may come back around after some more conversation and say, we're gonna shift that to the beginning of the month. Again, I think thinking about all of these, some of the other features in the calendar, for the years that Miller Driscoll was being constructed, in order to give the construction company as much time, we actually shifted our school start to after Labor Day. And people thought that was glorious. I kind of thought that was glorious.
I love it.
Summer felt like summer. And then in one of those years, I'm going to say maybe 2018, and 11 snow days. And it was like, hey, what are you doing on June 30th? Going to school. So, that was a problem, not just because everyone is toast, in the second half of June, but families make plans. So we had all kinds of kids who were going off to camp and doing these other things. And, they had this dual obligation of also being required to go to school. So, we keep the start of the school year, at the end of August. And, again, through experience, I've really developed a very held belief that, once you get, past, mid-June, that the quality of the time of school just goes away. And so it's really not worth pushing the end of the school year, far into June. So, it's better to try to front load. So that's why we have those pieces. The other things are pretty, kind of static. The February break is the February break. The December break is the December break. I don't think there's anything else that I'm missing. So I'll take, if you have questions, I'll take those. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to adopt the 25-26 calendar.
Just to recap, this amended calendar has 2 less.
One less.
One less. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're at 7, correct? Okay.
A couple of questions. One, the half days for, I'm just reminding the rationale why we have 4 half days or shortened days for conferences for K-8, and why can't we condense those into?
That's something we've looked at on again, and I haven't made a formal study. I have, in fairness, I've been thinking about parent engagement and how do we engage parents differently in conversations about their kids' progress and performance. And so I don't have a good answer, but we have had, this is the time we had and we use, and it's, the time that we need in order for all of our teachers to spend time with all of the families, particularly at Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill, so they can have, 15 and 20-minute conversations. I think at one point when I first got here, there was actually a 5th day that we removed because the consensus that we didn't
consolidate.
I did ask, Peg, when I was writing through that, I was interested in trying to engage in a conversation, just preliminarily about, some of these days, and, some just the quick feedback was, at least, and if I'm misquoting you, just say so, but the teachers that, she spoke to seemed to, appreciate these conference days. And I would not want to take them out of the calendar without having something else. You can't ask teachers, we can't just remove them and demand that teachers, meet with parents, prior to the start of the day, at the end of the day. That's it. We have to, bargain over a change just at that point. So that's my long-winded way of saying, this is why they're there.
But I think to answer your question, it is something for the board to think about whether we want to ask Kevin to engage in maybe a more formal study about, teacher needs and parent needs and how we look at those
Yeah,
days.
you don't even need to ask. It's been on my priority to-do list for.
We talked about it for
Yeah, it's been on, as I reviewed goals, like this is one of those areas I just have not been able to get to. It's important.
Yeah.
And, again, it not be.
Do other districts just do what we do, or do they have night ones? And how does that work?
I think you'd have to look across districts. When I was in Bethel at the middle school, we had, I think, 2 or 3 days, but they were, conferences took place, kind of all day long. in through the early evening hours. Some other districts have fall conferences and spring conferences. We don't really have spring conferences. So I think it depends.
I'd be curious to know how many conferences are happening through Zoom versus in person, and whether that provides efficiency. I mean, it's just way more common now. So
yeah, I think it does, and I'd have to rely on the principals at this point. At least in some cases, parents are given the option.
Right. Yeah. And then December 23rd, and then the last 3 days of the year that are all early release days. Are those PD days or no?
No, those are just end of year record keeping, closing out the school year time for teachers.
Okay. What about the
23rd is that's just an early release day.
Okay.
Leading into the holiday.
For everybody, leading into the holiday. Yeah.
Gosh, goes right up to the end.
And then the second, because I know that this year the first was a Wednesday, so the kids came back to school for like a truncated week the first week of Jan. We're off the second. Is that just because we don't think people will come back for one day?
Jake's a function of trying to stretch out the break. We had an opportunity because we're not going super late into June. It's a shorter week. Yeah, this you'll see over time that December break, depending on where Christmas falls, that break gets longer, and some years it gets shorter.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the longer. I think we kind of come into this current year and then the next year.
This past year was longer on the other end,
Yeah.
where we ended on a Friday.
That's right.
And the holiday wasn't until Wednesday or Thursday. Yeah.
It was Wednesday.
It was
Yeah.
Wednesday, yeah.
So it's time goes to think.
Right.
Yeah.
6 to sometimes.
Yeah, there's no perfect answer. I'm just curious.
I can't imagine that many people would come, if they're away, would come back for a Friday.
No. No.
Although I'm ready to send my kids back.
Yeah, any other questions?
Any other questions on the calendar? Is there then a motion to approve the revised proposed calendar for the 25-26 school year?
I so move.
Thank you, Pam. Is there a second? Thank you, Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Same. Motion carries unanimously.
Right, and then this, the last action item here is just a board approval for the science teachers summit for 26. And so they asked for on things, so that way they have the opportunity so this is, as you know, a well-established science that is a transformative time when there. And this comes to you because it's your obligation as a board to approve the national trips. So highly supported, it's been great.
It's a great time.
Forever.
Any questions on the Costa Rica trip? Is there a motion to approve the Costa Rica trip from June 24th, 2026 to July 2nd, 2026?
Motion.
Thank you, Todd. Is there a second? Thank you, Lori. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Happy Costa Rica planning. Any comments from the public? Hearing none, just future business, there'll be the Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday, the 7th. Our next regular meeting is April 17th. And then the annual town meeting, there'll be a regular meeting on May 1st, and then the annual town meeting on May 6th. Meeting adjourned, 8:45.
Did I